If you want to bring someone joy, knit them a chicken. Welcome back to the Craft Diaries podcast. This is my emotional support chicken, and today we're going to be talking about how I knitted her, as well as all of the other projects that I've been knitting and crocheting on in the last 2 months. If we've not met before, hi, I'm Em, also known as Meema Makes. I'm a crochet designer and I create beginner crochet tutorials here on YouTube, as well as inspirational crochet and knitting content such as this podcast. If that sounds great to you, then do hit that subscribe button. It's completely free, and all it means is that YouTube will show you more of my content. Right, let's start talking about my chicken. So you heard me call my chicken an emotional support chicken in the intro, and you're probably wondering, what on earth is an emotional support chicken? Well, it's a term that the designer of this pattern coined to be just a chicken that supports your emotions, essentially, and your mental health, because, and I think the reason for this is, when I knitted this and I finished it, it is the best thing to cuddle. It's like the perfect size and shape, and it's just like lovely to just sit and cuddle while you're like watching telly or something. And my partner quite likes cuddling it as well, so I think that's probably why it's called an emotional support chicken. And actually the making of it was quite mindful as well, because it was a lot of garter stitch, which is a really basic stitch with some short row shaping, so actually the making of it supports your emotions as well. So that might not be what the designer intended, but that's sort of how I've interpreted that name. So in terms of that designer, so her name is Annette Corsino. I had not heard of her before, I'd never made any of her patterns before. I actually found out about this pattern through a creator here on YouTube called Retro Claude. She has a great knitting channel. It's mostly knitting content with some sewing content. Specifically, she likes sort of retro patterns, usually 1940s knitting patterns, and she is a fellow creator that has ME chronic fatigue like myself, so I really enjoy her content. I love the retro vibe and just her personality. So she made a video about the emotional support chicken pattern, and that was the first time I'd come across it. It actually went viral on TikTok last year, but if you've been around for a while, you know that I don't use TikTok anymore. That was where I first sort of grew my platform, but I just don't get on with TikTok anymore, and I much prefer YouTube. So I kind of missed this trend, this viral pattern completely, and she made it, and she also made a 1940s duck with a very similar pattern and sort of compared the two, and I really enjoyed that video, and I was like, right, I'm going to knit an emotional support chicken just like Claude. So that's what I did. I bought the pattern on Ravelry. It is a paid pattern, but there is a tutorial here on YouTube. I think the tutorial is free. If it's not, I'll put it on the screen. If it's not, I'm pretty sure it's free. So yeah, so it's a knitting pattern, but there is also a crocheted version as well. I don't know if the crochet version has a video tutorial, but there's definitely a written pattern for a crocheted version of this if you are primarily a crocheter rather than a knitter. So it's kind of like, it's got very similar construction to the construction I'm about to talk about. So the original pattern, I believe, uses like 2 strands of fingering yarn held together and knitted. I actually made a chunkier chicken than that, so my chicken's actually bigger than the pattern, because the yarn that I used was a mixture of mostly Aran weight acrylic yarn scraps that I had with some DK weight scraps in there. I used multiple of different chickeny colours, as you can see, lots of this sort of coppery red, and there's like gold and beige in there and cream as well, to try and get sort of that look of like a chicken's plumage. I think that's what it's called, all the colours of the feathers basically. So yeah, so that's why I went for those colours, and yeah, I just used up scraps and leftovers really for it, which was kind of what the pattern recommended anyway, but with fingering weight. So I did go up a couple of needle sizes as well. I can't remember exactly what needles I used for all of the projects that I'm going to talk about in this podcast. I will link to my Ravelry project page down below that has notes, and it has, I keep notes as I go when I make my projects, so it has information about yarn, about patterns, and about modifications that I've made as well. So yeah, if you are interested in knitting an emotional support chicken but you want a big one, do check that out for needle sizes and things. And it is a really interesting construction to knit this chicken. So it's knitted flat, so a lot of the toys that I've made in the past have been knitted in the round or crocheted in the round. I've mostly done something called Amigurumi, which is crocheted toys, and this was knitted flat, stuffed, and then you seam it together. The seaming of it was interesting because I'd not done mattress stitch, which is a stitch that I've taught on this channel as a stitch for joining granny squares with an invisible join, but it's a stitch that was originally from knitting for seaming pieces together, and that was really interesting. I'll show you the seam in a minute that I'm talking about once we get to that part of the construction. So yeah, the seaming was interesting. So the way that it is knitted is you knit the different parts. So first off, you knit sort of the two tail sections, so the front and the back of the tail, with these sort of this bit of shaping here, and it is knit in entirely in garter stitch, which is like the first stitch you learn at the beginning because it's just knit stitches, apart from the beak here, which is knit in stockinette. Yeah, so it's really good because you're just knitting. But I wouldn't say this was a beginner-friendly project because the shaping of it uses something called short rows. So if you think about when you're constructing something in rows, you're sort of going flat and you'll end up with like a rectangle. But if you do partial rows, you can actually get shapes in there, and that's often used in sort of garment construction to get different shapes, for example across the shoulders. That's kind of how you end up with the shaping, for example, for this rounded section here for the tummy. And so that is not a beginner technique, but it's quite easy to learn, especially as there is a video tutorial for it. So I would probably say this is good for sort of improver and beyond projects. I wouldn't recommend this as a first knitting project, but it's a great sort of second, third or fourth knitting project if you are interested in knitting it. So essentially you knit the two back sections, you stitch them together, and then I picked up, if you can see here, so I knitted along here, picked up stitches along here, and then knitted this way with the short row shaping, knitted in this direction up to the head and finished with the beak. So that ended up with, you ended up with like one big piece, and then you knit this kind of rugby ball diamond shape. I don't know what sort of shape to call it, but yeah, this sort of tummy piece here to give it more shaping. And then you knit thank you to the person in the comments in the last podcast told me that this is called a comb and a wattle. I think I just called them the chicken's dangly bits. So yeah, in the last podcast, but yeah, so it's called a comb and a wattle. You knit those separately too. And then you seam it together, and like I said, I use mattress stitch for the seaming, and I am so proud of how my mattress seam turned out. I'm just going to come in a bit closer so I can show you my seaming that I'm really, really proud of. I want to document on this channel that I'm really proud of this mattress stitch seam. So yeah, so I mattress stitched this seam, and if you look closely, it looks like, the way that I've stitched them together, it looks like this row of bumps from the garter stitch just runs into the next one and runs into the next one right across this seam here. So this is actually a seam, but it all looks like one continuous row, and I am so, so proud of that seam, and it's so neat. I really, really like it. So yeah, I stuffed this. It used about 3/4, maybe just over 3/4 of a 300-gram bag of toy stuffing, and then I used 2 amigurumi eyes from a set I bought on Amazon like years ago. So that's how I made my emotional support chicken, and you can too if you want to. I'll link the pattern down in the description. Definitely recommend this pattern for anyone who you know who's having a hard time, or maybe a child, or just anyone. I feel like adults can enjoy cuddly stuffed toys as well, because why not? Life is hard enough. So if you want to bring someone joy, knit 'em a chicken. And she is going to emotionally support me through the filming of the rest of this episode by being on the desk behind me, because you might have noticed, if you are not new to my channel, that I have not uploaded a YouTube video for the last 2 months, and I apologise for that. That's because I've been focusing on all of the video tutorials for the crochet along that's running at the minute, that I'll talk about a bit later in the crochet along. So it's been a little while since I did a face-to-face video, so my chicken can be here, and the chicken doesn't have a name. If you have any name suggestions, drop them in the comments. At the minute, we've just been calling her Chicken. So yeah, if you do, she wants to fall over. There we go. So yeah, so if you have any name ideas for my chicken, do drop them in the comments, because I feel like she needs a name rather than just being called the chicken. So the next finished project I want to share with you is actually the one that I'm wearing, and that is this cardigan. I'll put up some footage on the screen of me wearing it now. So this cardigan is the April cardigan by a designer called Petiteknits. She's a very, very popular designer online, and this is my second experience of her patterns. I don't like to be critical of other designers, especially one that's so popular, but my brain does not mesh well with her writing, so I won't be knitting any of her patterns in the future. However, I did quite enjoy knitting this cardigan because it was my first time doing a shoulder construction called contiguous join, and I'll just lift up my arm and show you what I mean by contiguous join. So there are a lot of different ways of constructing the shoulder and the armhole split section of a cardigan, and there are loads and loads of different ways of doing it, some more popular than others, and this is a construction that I believe is called a contiguous join because you sort of knit it as you go, but there is shaping. So if you can see, I've got this section here which I believe is called a saddle shoulder. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I'm very new to knitting garments. I've been at this less than a year, so do let me know if I get any of these terms wrong, and I will try and correct myself in the next episode. So yeah, so this here, so we knit down here and we kind of have these increases along here to make this section here, and then we have some increases here where we're increasing on one side on the sleeve, and then down here we increase on both sides of this, kind of like you would do for a raglan construction where you have increases either side, so on the sort of the front panel and the sleeve panel here. So I think that's called a contiguous construction, and that is my first time knitting a cardigan with this construction. And although I enjoyed knitting it, I'm not quite 100% happy with the fit. So I feel like there's just quite a lot of fabric in the armpit, and I think I prefer a traditional just raglan shaping, and I enjoy knitting it more than this contiguous shaping. So I did really enjoy knitting this cardigan. I added in some pockets that aren't on the pattern, they're just simple patch pockets. I will link my Ravelry project below which has notes on how I made those patch pockets if you would like to knit this cardigan and you wanted some sort of perfect size patch pockets, like it's enough for me to just put my fingers in. It's not quite enough for me to put my phone in, but I specifically knitted this cardigan to wear with summer dresses, which is why I chose a sort of more summery yarn that was a cotton blend, because I wanted something summery that I could wear over summer dresses, and with summer dresses you tend not to have pockets, so I thought pockets would be a good thing. I also had a fair amount of yarn left over even after the pockets. So the yarn that I used is a yarn called Drops Cotton Merino, which is a 50-50 cotton merino blend, I believe, and I used the colour sea green or colour number 29 because I know that those colour names don't necessarily sort of translate to other languages exactly the same. So it's colour number 29, and it's this lovely duck egg blue, and it's quite a muted duck egg blue. It's quite a dusty colour, which I prefer those more muted colours on me and my colouring, so it's perfect. And I think this dress it matches this dress perfectly. It's just like the perfect match. I have some other dresses that I'm sure it will look good with as well. So I initially intended for this cardigan to be sort of a canvas for me to add some crochet daisies to. Specifically, again, I'm talking about Retro Claude YouTube channel here because I am in love with her content and her vibe. So on the Retro Claude videos, Claude, she mostly does sort of like vintage knitting content now, but she has this grey cardigan where she knitted it, and she got these embroidery transfers and put them either side of sort of the opening, décolletage, that bit, so sort of here, and it looked really cute, and that was part of the pattern. It was recommended in the pattern. It was like a 1950s vintage pattern, I think, and I really love it. She wears it a lot in her videos. She says it's her favourite cardigan, and I love that look with those two flowers there. I love florals, so I really wanted to do something like that, but I didn't want to buy like an embroidery transfer to do it. First of all, I thought I would embroider some flowers myself, and then I kind of went off that idea, and then I thought, well, I could just make up a pattern for some crochet flowers and sew them on and do them like really tiny with thread, maybe have a go at doing some like micro crochet or some like really small gauge crochet. And that was the plan. That still may be the plan, but I put this on for the first time this morning because I sewed on the buttons this morning and showed my partner, and I was like, do you think I should? And he was like, no, I think it looks good as it is. I don't think you should. I think it'll be too much for it because you want to wear it with the floral dresses, so it kind of calms the busy floral pattern down. And he had a really good point there, actually. So I haven't yet washed and blocked it. I intended to wash and block it before I sewed any crochet to it anyway, so I'm planning on washing and blocking it and then making that decision whether I am going to add crochet flowers to it or not. I kind of want to. If not this, then another cardigan. And I specifically knitted this cardigan because I wanted a plain stockinette cardigan that fit me nicely around the shoulders and was a little bit cropped to do those flowers on. So maybe I need to rethink that and think of maybe potentially a warmer cardigan that then becomes, because I feel like when you wear a summer dress, that's kind of like I don't know much about fashion terms and things, that's kind of like the prominent thing that you're looking at, like the busyness of it, the busyness of the pattern, that's like the thing that pops in your outfit, and the cardigan's just sort of there to cover essentially. And maybe I need to, if I'm going to do a cardigan that has those flowers on, maybe that needs to be the pop piece, and then I wear a plain t-shirt and jeans with it. So yeah, I'm still debating that. If you have any opinions on whether I should put flowers on this or not, please let me know in the comments, because I'm really in like two minds about it. So I'm just gonna not for a while and see how I feel about it and how much I actually wear this cardigan, because we are moving into autumn now. I'm not going to be wearing flowery summer dresses for much longer at the beginning of September, so how much wear I'll get out of it, I don't know. So yeah, that is my cardigan. I recommend the pattern, actually, even though it doesn't gel well with how my brain works. I think it is a nice pattern. The fit in the armpits is not the best, but the fit across the shoulders for my narrow sloping shoulders is nice, and it's nice and customizable. Like if you wanted to make it longer or shorter, it's a good basic cardigan pattern. But I think for me personally, I probably won't knit this again. So my last finished project to share with you is also a knitted project. I do have a couple of crochet projects to show you in the next part of this podcast where we talk about my works in progress. One of them is quite a big work in progress, so that's why I don't have any finished crochet projects to show you. So my next finished object was a pair of socks, and I went through a sock knitting phase last year, but I haven't really knit any socks this year, I don't think. So yeah, and they're Christmas socks. So I knitted Christmas socks in July. I had got to the point with this cardigan where I was at the point where I needed to pick up along the edge to do the 1x1 ribbing for the button band, and the idea of doing hundreds and hundreds of knit half twisted ribbing, because I did half twisted ribbing with this cardigan, I couldn't face it. I really didn't want to do it. I was like, do you know what? I'm gonna knit a pair of socks, and like I need some stuff for when we're in the car. I like to have a pair of socks on the go, or something that's knitted in the round on the go for when we're doing car journeys. And I went to my sister's wedding in June, and I think that's when I cast these on, and I knitted them through July, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that was why I cast them on, was because my sister's wedding was imminent, or maybe I was knitting this in the car, I can't remember. But anyways, so I like knitting socks in the car. So yeah, I decided, and the next on my sort of like list of socks I want to knit was Christmas socks that I meant to cast on Christmas Eve, and got distracted by a different yarn and cast on a different pair of socks on Christmas Eve. So yeah, these are my Christmas socks knitted in July. So this pattern, you can see we've got like a lace stripe that runs down the side of the sock. I'll kind of show you in the one that's not on a blocker. So it kind of runs down one side, and it's on the other side of each foot, so it's on the outside. The pattern is called Winter's Frost by This Handmade Life. I have knitted this pattern of socks before. I really enjoy it. It's a really easy to remember sort of lace pattern that's mostly stockinette. I did cuff down, so I started at the cuff and worked my way down, and I did a slip stitch heel, and yeah, that's kind of all to say. It was my usual sort of sock pattern. I think I usually cast on 68 stitches. I think this pattern is for 64 stitches, so I just sort of like distributed them evenly because I have quite wide feet and wide ankles, so I usually like 64 stitch socks, which is the standard size for a women's pair of socks, is too small for me. So I tend to go up to a 68 stitch. So we'll talk about the yarn next. I'm going to hold it up to the camera because it's this really beautiful colour, and I specifically went to buy this colour at Yorkshire Yarn Fest in autumn last year, because specifically to knit a pair of red socks for Christmas, and this was the only dyer that did a non-bright red colour yarn. I don't know if red is difficult to dye, because I rarely see like a wine red or like a red burgundy claret colour hand dyed yarn. It's like quite rare for me, at least in the dyers that I enjoy and them. So yeah, so this is the yarn, and this is the first time I've ever used this hand dyer. I've seen them at shows before, but they're usually bright rainbow coloured yarns, and that's not usually me. They usually have like a rainbow display, and I tend to towards the side of sort of like more dustier colours, with more grey tone in them, more softer pastels. So yeah, so the company is All Wool That Ends Wool, and it's just a standard. I think it's the one that everyone uses, which is, well, almost everyone. That's like 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon sock yarn, that's 425 meters to 100 grams. Yeah, and the colour is called Wine, and as you can see from my label, it cost me £17. And I've got a lot left over. I've got this ×2 because I split my yarn in two and I knit my socks sort of side by side, not two at a time. I knit them side by side on separate needles. So yeah, I've got 2 left. I don't know actually how much weight I've got left, like how much these actually, I have got scales, but I'm not gonna weigh it. So yeah, I've got quite a lot of this yarn left. That'll go into my leftover sock yarn box, which I'm kind of saving up because next year I want to do a sock yarn leftover scrappy blanket. I've been saving up all of my scraps for it, so these will probably go in that, although there's quite a lot of it left. Like, I feel like I could probably use this for another project as well as the scrappy blanket because there's so much of it left. So yeah, I really like that with sock yarn, is because I like the legs of my socks to be quite short. I usually have quite a lot left over when I knit a pair of socks, and I like that because I like scrappy projects. So yeah, that is my Christmas in July socks, and I should probably think about my Christmas knitting because we're now in September, and I did want to knit myself or crochet some sort of like Christmas jumper last year, and I never got round to it, and so I kind of want to do it this year, and we're in September, so now is probably the time to start. So I should probably try and find a pattern and some yarn that's sufficiently Christmassy enough, although as you can see, you can't even see all of it. One second. That is my current hand-dyed yarn stash, not including all of my leftovers or my minis. So I have plenty of single skeins of all that. Let's get it back in the middle of this. So I have plenty of single skeins of hand-dyed sock yarn, but I just don't have a huge amount of like sweater quantities of one colour. So yeah, and if I'm going to knit a Christmas sweater that I'm only going to wear a couple of times a year, I don't really want to knit it in like hand-dyed yarn. I'd rather knit it in something a little bit cheaper because I'm not going to get as much wear out of it. As much as I really enjoy hand-dyed yarn and I am privileged and I'm in the position where I can afford hand-dyed yarn, it's not the right thing for every project. So yeah. Right, let's move on to my works in progress, and we're going to start with crochet because there has not been enough crochet in this podcast yet. So the next project I'm going to talk about is my second Yorkshire blanket. If you have been on Meema Makes before, if you've seen any of my community posts, if you're in the Facebook group, if you're on social media, if you watched my last video, you'll know that this summer has been the summer of the Yorkshire Sampler Crochet Along blanket. This is a blanket that I designed throughout this year. It's been my sort of sole focus for a lot of this year, and it is a sampler blanket of 12 different granny square designs inspired by Yorkshire. This is a crochet along that's in collaboration with Yorkshire Yarn Fest. I will link all of this down below if you're interested in joining in this crochet along. It's the blanket that I've got on the chair behind me, and I made this blanket out of 24 mini skeins of sock yarn, but I knew that I wanted to make a bigger version because this blanket is quite small and it's quite thin because it's made of sock yarn, and I knew that I wanted a bigger blanket. So this blanket is 24 squares because you get 24 mini skeins in a yarn advent, so I wanted it to be sort of yarn advent friendly. But I knew that when I was crocheting it, I wanted to make another one. This pattern is my baby. I've poured myself and me and my partner's relationship and my life here in Yorkshire, which is being my adopted home. We're coming up on my 8-year anniversary of moving to Yorkshire. So I poured myself into it, and I put so much effort into the pattern and the video tutorials and just all of the resources for the people that are joining in the crochet along, and I am loving seeing everybody crocheting it. We're on week 9 or 10? I think we're on week 9 currently of the crochet along, and if you're interested in joining, I'll link it all down below with all of the information you need, and I will actually link my video all about the Yorkshire Crochet Along straight after this video, which kind of takes a podcast style format. So if that's something that you're interested in, then I'll make sure that it's sort of on the screen for you to click at the end of this podcast, and that has all of the details in it about the crochet along, what yarn you need, how the crochet along is going to run, everything like that. It's being released in 4 parts. I've released 3 of them, and we've got the 4th part coming in at the end of September. I think it's the 28th of September off the top of my head. So yeah, anyway, I've been joining in my own crochet along. This is the 4th crochet along blanket that I've run in my about 18 months. I think this channel's been going about 18 months now, so it's in the last 18 months. This is my 4th crochet along blanket. And I wanted to join in one of my crochet alongs because as a designer, you design it in advance, and then people join in the crochet along without you because you've already released the pattern. But I wanted to join in one of my own crochet alongs, and I have, but I have not kept up with this crochet along at all. We're on week 9 and I have not done my squares for week 8 yet. I'm up to week 7. I've finished all of my squares for week 7, and I have a good excuse for not doing them. So I'll show you the squares that I've been crocheting. So like I said, the original blanket is in sock yarn. I am currently using for my next version of this blanket Stylecraft Naturals bamboo and cotton blend. It's mostly bamboo with some cotton in there, and I'll put up the colours that I'm using on the screen with my my planned layout, and yeah, I'll show you the squares that I've done. Not all of the squares that I've done are in this pile because I've got some that are almost done or half done from tutorials. I finished filming the border tutorial the day before yesterday, and I've kind of got my little sample for that tutorial here with part of the border done, so that all needs unpicking so that I can turn it into the actual proper blanket. I've got yarn everywhere now. So yeah, anyways, I'll show you some of my squares. So like I said, I've done all of the squares. I'm doing 3 squares per colour per week, so all of week 1 square, all of 1 square is 1 colour. So yeah, so the first square that I've crocheted that's the wrong way around, this way around. So this is the Bronte square, and this is in the shade Dove, and I love this lace that I designed here to be sort of reminiscent of Gothic architecture and Victorian lace. These are not going to be in order for those that are joining in the crochet along, they're just whatever comes out in the pile next to me. So this is the waterfall square. That's inspired by the waterfalls at Gordell Scar and Malham Cove. This is the mill wheel square, that was week 2. That's in the colour, I've not been saying the colour, this is the colour Umber. What I'll do is I'll link the project page on Ravelry because I know there are some people that are using the same yarn as me, and there's a list on that page of what colour I'm using for what square design in what week. Oh yeah, this is just a random one that I finished for a tutorial because I've been using these squares for filming the video tutorials. So yeah, so I've been filming the tutorials, so I have got some of these squares done for tutorials like this one. So this is square 11. This is the Walk in the Woods square inspired by a place called Otley Chevin. You can see my 3D trees here with those cluster stitches representing the path through the woods. Oh, this square's one of my faves, if not my favourite. This is the Falling Leaves square. It's got loads of cluster stitches to represent leaves. That's the colour Canyon. I like this colour, it's like a dusty peach. It's lovely. Oh yeah, this is, I think this is my current favourite square. Not current favourite to crochet, but current favourite as in I want to make this into a cushion to match. So this is the lambing season square. You can see we've got these groups of puff stitches to represent the sheep on a field. Like I said, I will link this video down below and at the end of this podcast all about these squares. I show them in detail, I talk about the inspiration behind them, and I talk about how the Crochet Along runs. So yeah, if you want to see more of these squares, then head over to that video. So this is the foxglove square, inspired by foxgloves. And then the last square I've got to show you, where I've got just like random, I've got like multiples. Most of these I've made 2 or 3 of them to sort of, I try to get my 3 done by the end of the Crochet Along, but like I said, I am currently running nearly 2 weeks behind, but I'll catch up, I'm sure. That's the Moorland square there in the colour celery, which I think is a really good name for this sort of like green. It's very pale green. So yeah, so that's kind of my primary focus for my crochet at the minute, has been getting those squares done, and it looks like I just need to change the battery for my camera. Okay, I've changed the battery now. So we were talking about the crochet squares, the Yorkshire Crochet Along. So that's kind of been my primary focus, because any crochet time that I felt like I want to do some crochet, if I've got the energy, I've done a square tutorial, and those tutorials, you know, some of them are going on an hour long. For some of those square tutorials, they take me about 3 hours to film and about double that to edit. So they're quite a big time investment, those tutorials. So that's kind of where all of my crochet energy has gone. I've now finished filming the tutorials. I finished filming them 2 days ago. So I'm kind of thinking now, what next? Obviously I want to finish this blanket and I want to keep up with the Crochet Along. But after that, what's next? I've got so many ideas for blanket designs, and like I said, that I've thought about a cushion design. Some of my older patterns, page patterns, I want to go back and rework. So yeah, so I've kind of got all these ideas jumping around, buzzing in my head, and I need to chill because I've kind of lost my crochet mojo a little bit. I think it's from having to film all those tutorials, and that I started the process of designing this blanket in January, and we are now in September, and it's been all that I have crocheted. I think, well, actually I'm going to talk about a project in a minute, but that was like an afternoon's worth of crochet. Apart from that, that has been my primary crochet. I've not crocheted anything else since January, and I think I'm burnt out. I think I'm a little bit burned out of designing, so I'm taking a step back from designing, I think, at least until this Crochet Along ends at the beginning of November, and then I'll start thinking about the next Crochet Along design. I love doing Crochet Along blankets, they're so much fun. I enjoy how happy it seems to make people, especially in the Facebook group. So yeah, I will continue doing those Crochet Alongs, but I need a break. I need a break from designing. I need to stop thinking about writing patterns and making tutorials for a design. So my plan is from now until Christmas to focus on this YouTube channel, to go back to posting weekly with lots of tutorials. I've got a whole long list, and some of them I've been promising since like December. So like for the hexagon blanket. So I've got loads of tutorials I need to make. There's a whole load of like, I never finished my craft room. I want to finish making my craft room and filming it and getting that up to you. So that's kind of like my plan, and from now until Christmas. I went on a bit of a tangent there, but yeah, so that's kind of what I've planned for Meema Makes, is I am going to focus 100% on this YouTube channel. If you've not subscribed, now is the time to subscribe, because let me tell you, I am so excited for some of the content that I'm planning on filming next week. Okay, let's move on to some more projects. Let's talk about my other crochet project. Like I said, this is kind of not really a proper crochet project because I've not worked on it for months. I just realised that I forgot to talk about it in one of my previous podcasts. I thought I'd talk about it today because this is going to be a long one, because we've got 2 months worth of crochet and knitting to catch up with. So it's actually a pattern from this book here. So this is Kawaii Crochet Garden by Melissa Bradley, and it's actually one of my partner's books. I think I bought this for him for Christmas because he really loves amigurumi, but he's discovered that he's not actually a massive fan of doing it. He just likes having it. So yeah, anyway, he had a load of amigurumi stuff that I've now kind of inherited, as he's decided that he doesn't want to do amigurumi. So yeah, so this book, and generally amigurumi is cute, but it's not my vibe. It's often too bright. I don't like the fact that you give inanimate object faces. I don't know, it's just not my thing. And I do it, but generally I do it for a gift unless it's something for me. Like for example, I made this so long ago, it's not technically amigurumi, but it is crocheted. This is actually, God, when did I make this? I've got to make this. I made this shortly after she put up the blog post. I'll put the date of the blog post on the screen. It was a long time ago, and it is a bird from Lucy of Attic24 blog, who kind of like kicked off the whole yarn pack crochet along thing in the UK at least, back in like 2009, 2010 when I first got into crochet. So yeah, this is one of her patterns on her blog that I made, and I love it because, you know, it's got little flower embroidery. It's not too, like, it's an animal, so it should have eyes, and yeah, so but it's not too much. I think a lot of sort of some of this is a bit too much for me. It's a bit too childlike, it's a bit too bright. But what I'm planning on doing is maybe making some without the faces, because it's the faces that, I don't know, it's just not my vibe. So yeah, I'm crocheting this, but without the face, basically. And I'm doing it in different colours as well. So I'll show you what I've got so far. So I've got my pot, and as you can see, it's in my sort of colours. We've got that golden yellow that I love and a dusty pink that I love. So yeah, so I've got this pot, and then I've done the dirt, and then there's flowers to go in the top. So I'll show you one of my flowers. I think I changed the pattern for this flower, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I'm not really sure. This might not be the one that's in the pattern, but there's the flower. And I've just, so this was made in Drops Paris cotton that I've got a fair amount of stash for, specifically for like amigurumi projects. So I have done lots of amigurumi for gifts in the past because they're so quick to whip up. So yeah, so that was in Drops Paris, which is 100% cotton Aran yarn. And then I did these flowers in that same yarn as this, my Yorkshire blanket, so the Stylecraft bamboo and cotton, and that's in the colour cream, I think. And then I just stitched, I think the pattern, it has you crochet the centre, but I didn't have a yellow that I liked in the thinner yarn. So this Stylecraft bamboo and cotton is labelled as a DK, but it's more of a sportwear yarn. So I didn't have a yellow that I liked in that yarn, so I used some stitches of the Drops Paris to make the centre of the flower. And essentially I've also got some more of the bamboo cotton to make the stems and the leaves. And then the reason why I kind of like, I thought, oh, I'll just do this in an afternoon and I'll just make it, and that'll give me a bit of, this is before I moved, and we moved in March. So this is probably like February, March time I was doing this, because I made it specifically to have in my office, so in my craft room that we're in right now. So yeah, and then you put the flowers on this is floristry wire, and then you poke the floristry wire into the mud, and that's kind of how you make the pot of flowers. I just never got around to doing that bit because I didn't have any floristry wire. So I ended up buying some floristry wire. Don't know where I bought it. It was either Hobbycraft or Amazon. So I bought some floristry wire. I just never got around to actually sewing the flowers onto the floristry wire and putting the floristry wire in. So I probably should, because I'd quite like this little pot of flowers to be on my desk in this office that I've made. And yeah, the pattern is actually for forget-me-not flowers, which are blue, but I made daisies instead because this is me and I love daisies. I've got like multiple crochet patterns that are daisies, so yeah, I like daisies. So that's my other crochet project, and I need to get that done, and I pulled it out today to add to this pile to show you in the podcast, so that I actually get it done, so that I have motivation to get it done before the next podcast episode, which I'm hoping will be in a month's time. I'm going to go back to the monthly filming of the podcast now. So yeah, so that's my other crochet project I've been working on. And then I've got 2 more knitting projects that are sort of works in progress, a failed project to talk about, as well as 2 projects that actually aren't knitting or crochet. One is to do with yarn and one is not at all to do with yarn. So I'm really excited to talk about those as well. And I'll leave those till the end of the podcast if all you're here for is knitting and crochet. So this is a knitted sweater, and I've been learning a new skill. If you're over on Instagram, I've been posting about this the last couple of days. I've been learning a new skill, and it's a skill that I have tried and failed to learn in the past, and I have finally cracked it, and I feel a little bit emotional about finally cracking it because it's been a really long journey to get to this point. Crochet to me came really naturally, I just kind of like got it. Knitting has been a chore to learn. I have spent years and years building up my skills. I only properly became confident with cables last year. I've just spent such a long time building up my knitting skills, and it takes me a long time to learn things, and I still have to watch tutorials. Whereas crochet, I don't think I really watched that many tutorials to begin with, and it just clicked in my brain. I feel like some people knitting clicks and crochet doesn't, and some people crochet clicks clicks, knitting doesn't click with me. But I am so proud of this. I've been learning colourwork. I am so giddy about this. I tried knitting colourwork several times over the last like 10 plus years. And like we're going on 14 years of me being a crocheter now. I've been a knitter since I was a kid, but not more than like a garter stitch scarf until sort of I was about 19, I think, and then I got back into knitting and quickly flipped to crochet. And then I've been slowly on and off building my knitting skills, and I've tried knitting colourwork so many times, and I end up in a big tangled mess with yarn all wrapped around each other and uneven stitches, and it looked terrible. And I think the only thing I ever finished that was colourwork was like a doll's dress with like a flower on it, and it was so horrible and like pulled and buckled where my floats were too tight, and yeah. But look, I'm knitting it and it's even texture. Look at this. Just look at those stitches. I am so proud of myself. And I think the thing that I've struggled with in the past with my tension is traditionally when you knit colourwork, or at least most people I've seen knitting colourwork or do tutorials online, they hold one yarn in one hand and one yarn in the other, and they knit English style with one yarn and continental style with the other. The difference between knitting continental and knitting English style, you hold the yarn in the right hand and wrap it round, and the continental style, you hold it in your left hand and you sort of pick it with your needle. And I don't like knitting continental style. I can knit continental style. I crochet with my yarn in my left hand, but I don't like knitting like it. I find my tension is so loose when I knit like that. And I have tried, I did like a whole scarf doing it at one point, and it's just not for me. I find it painful, for example, just for one thing, and my tension's loose and uneven, and I much prefer knitting English style. And with English style, if I'm just doing knit stitch, I can knit without looking, and that's really great for watching knitting in front of the telly. I can't crochet without knitting, but I can knit English style, plain knit stitch in front of the telly without looking at it for like rounds. I can do rounds and rounds of like a sock or whatever without even looking. I have always struggled with knitting colourwork because you have to hold one of the strands of yarn in the left hand. Also, I thought, and then I found out you could knit colourwork by dropping one colour and picking up the next colour and dropping it and picking it up, and it takes a really long time, but you can knit it and you end up with a really even tension. So I tried that and I couldn't work out why, but I was just getting my yarns like in a twist and tangled, and I was still getting like uneven bits, and I just really wasn't enjoying it. And then I saw this video, and I will link it down below, of this woman knitting colourwork holding both yarns in her right hand, and that's what I wanted all along. I just wanted to be able to hold both of my yarns and switch between the two as I was doing it. And she basically, I'll put actually a clip up now of me knitting. So basically when I knit, I use my first finger to sort of like wrap the yarn around the needle and put it through for my knit stitch. But what she taught me in this YouTube video was that if you hold both hands, you can flick your finger one way or the other way when you change colour, so you only wrap one finger and you sort of like do a different movement to wrap the other yarn around. It's really hard to describe, which is why I said I'd put some footage up. And like, oh, it's so good. Literally, I did one round of this sweater doing that technique that I'd learnt, and my partner was half asleep on the sofa next to me in front of the TV. It was like 9 o'clock at night. I was like, Liam, wake up, I did it, and he was like, what? I was like, I knitted colourwork, and he was like, so? And I was like, I've been trying for so long and I did it. And I was like, I did it. I was so giddy, and I was giddy for ages, and I couldn't stop, and I just kept knitting. And after about 4 rounds, like it just clicked in my brain. And I think sometimes you just need that moment of where, oh my god, this clicks, I get it now, I understand it. And I just did it, and I was just so happy and really proud of myself. Like, it's been like when I learned how to do cables, or I knitted my first sock and my first sweater, I'm proud of myself, but I'm like really proud of myself for this because of my struggle of trying to learn it. And I love colourwork. Like, I've seen colourwork jumpers and cardigans and scarves, and I love them, like Fair Isle style stuff and like more modern stuff. I just love it all, and I love colour. and it's a way of bringing more colour to my knitting, and I just love it so much. And now I can knit it and I can make all the things that I've wanted to make for so long. So yeah, sorry, I went on a little bit of a little rant there about how much I love colourwork and learning to knit it. So yeah, like, I feel like if you ever think there's a skill that you just can't do, and I think for a lot of people that I talk to, it's, for example, reading crochet patterns, or maybe doing a complicated crochet stitch like a puff stitch, like, oh, I can't do that, I've tried and I can't do it. Keep trying, don't give up. Try different tutorials, try different methods, try different techniques until you get it, because when you do finally get it, it is so rewarding. And that's what I love about these crafts, is they are skills, and they are skills that you can use for the rest of your life, and you end up with these pretty things to wear and use around your house, and you get that sense of accomplishment when you finish something. Oh yeah, sorry, I really love knitting and crochet, and I'm so glad I have them at this point in my life. Yeah, should we actually talk about my sweater now, rather than colourwork, knitting and big motivational speeches? Yeah, right, let's actually talk about my jumper. So let me hold it up again. So the pattern that I'm knitting is the Kerr Sweater by Rebecca Clow. I don't know how to say her surname. And she has the Creabea knitting podcast. I really enjoy her podcast, and I've enjoyed knitting her designs. I do recommend them, they're great. I'll talk about another one of her designs after this, of a failed knitting project that was all my fault why it failed. But yeah, so that is that. And it's great because you have there's a lot of stockinette as well as that colourwork, so it's like chopping and changing all the time, so it keeps it interesting. With something like this, I'm fine with knitting something like this cardigan that's just stockinette, because it's just stockinette in the round with a bit of shaping, like increase and decrease. Yeah, that's fine. That's great knitting for when I need something mindless. But when I need something really engaging, something like this is great, because you've got all the construction, and then you've got these colourwork panels that are really interesting to knit. And you can see the colourwork here. There's a colourwork panel around the body, and there's also a sort of like inline coordinating colourwork panel on the sleeves as well. And I think that's just like the perfect project, because at that point you'd usually be just doing stockinette in the round, but then there is also sections that are stockinette in the round that are a bit more mindless. So this jumper has actually come together really quickly. I think I've been knitting this just over a week maybe, or just under a week, about that, and look how far I've got, because I can't put it down. I cannot put this down because I just want to do the next bit. Like last night I started doing the sleeve and I just couldn't put it down, and I ended up staying up later than I thought to, because I just couldn't put this colourwork down. Yeah, so I have changed this pattern a bit. So I'm knitting, I think, a size 6 or maybe a size 5, I can't remember. I'm knitting that size, and it's the 47-inch bust one. My gauge on the yarn, so the yarn that I'm using, actually, let's talk about yarn before I talk about my changes to the pattern. Let me grab it. So the yarn that I'm using is Serda Haworth Tweed, and the main colour that I'm using is this colour, which is like a reddy orange. It's called Rydell Russet, so I guess it's like a russet. It's more of an orange than a red, I would say, but it's not like bright in your face orange. I think it comes across a bit brighter on the camera than it actually is in real life. And as you can see, it's a tweed, so there's flecks of other colours in there, of like purple and turquoise and orange, and it's really nice. I ordered it online, and when I first got it, I didn't like the feel of it. It felt really strange, but I'd been crocheting with cotton and bamboo when I got this, and that's mainly sort of all superwash yarn, so it was a bit weird feeling. It's kind of got, when you first feel it, it almost feels like it's got like a coat of something on it, but it doesn't. It's just the texture of it. It's almost, if I bring it up to the screen again, it's almost like it's felted. It's not, it's hard to explain. It is 2 plies of yarn twisted together but quite loosely, and it's quite fluffy in that sense, but not fluffy. It's hard to explain until you actually feel it. They describe it as a rustic yarn. I don't think it's rustic as in scratchy, like it's lovely and soft against my neck. And I think it's a 50% merino, 50%, yeah, it's 50% merino, 50% nylon. So it's got that nylon in there, so it should be quite hard wearing, and the merino will make it soft. I have a feeling it's going to pill, like bobble quite a lot. Like, I don't know if you can see the halo of it there, I think it's going to bubble quite easily. So I'm using this colour as the main colour, and that is the Rydale Russet. And then I'm using the same yarn in a different colour called Yorkshire Stone, and that doesn't come across very well on camera. It's a really difficult colour to describe. I would say it is an off-white, pinky grey beige. It's really hard. If I got something white I can hold it against, because I feel like that's when you see the colour properly. Got a random envelope here from opening some post earlier. So if I hold this against it, can you kind of see what I mean about the fact that it's a pinky grey beige? It's a really hard colour to describe. It looks basically beigey grey when it's knitted up next to this orange, which I just wanted something with a high contrast. I wanted like a neutral. So I'll bring that right up close to the camera so you can see. So again, it's a tweed, so it's got those colours in it. It's got that orangey colour in it, which I thought would make it would make a really good like contrast colour. I ordered both of these yarns without looking, and I'm really happy with my colour choices. I did actually order a 10 pack of both colours, so I'm going to have quite a lot of this left over to knit something else. I'll wait until I've finished my jumper to decide what I'm going to be knitting with this, but I might knit with this next just so it's out of my stash. So yeah, I love that yarn, and if we put them both together, it's just the perfect combination for autumn. And I think that's what triggered me to cast it on, because I'll show you the project next. It was a failure. I cast it on about 6 times and kept ripping it out and trying again and trying different things. It was a summer top in cotton, and I mean, I just couldn't get it. I just couldn't get what I wanted, and I just thought, do you know what? I think I don't want to knit this because it's not summer anymore. We're moving into autumn. We're on the first week of well, this was like the end of August that I made this decision. I don't want to knit this summer project anymore. I want to knit an autumn project. I know what autumn project I'll knit. One that's orange. So yeah, we'll talk next about the changes that I made to the pattern. So the shaping itself is going to be the same. I'm following the exact instructions for it. My gauge is like half a stitch too big, so I went a size down, and that's worked out. It fits me really well actually. So the first change I made is I made a really long neck, because I wanted this to be kind of like a folded collar, like almost a turtleneck, but not really deep, because I find those really warm and cozy. I'm one of those kinds of people that gets cold so easily, so I really appreciate like turtlenecks, and I've only got one at the minute. The other thing is with the Colourwork chart, I've changed it. So I'll put up a picture of the pattern now, and I'm sure the designer had an intention for this, that the sort of squares within the Colourwork were different. I really didn't like it. I wanted them all to be the same, so I opened up this chart, saved it, and made changes like making some blocks white and some blocks black on the chart so that it was even. So if you have a look at mine, those squares are all the same. So I kind of changed the Colourwork chart there for that. And I think it's just because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I want things to be nice and even and symmetrical, and the fact that chart wasn't, well, it was symmetrical, but it was like not the same, was really bugging me. I actually did knit a little bit of it and was like, no. And then the other thing to say is, so the chart is across 22 stitches, and obviously you're doing it around the sleeve, but for the different sleeve sizes, she's got like sections in the sleeve, which I understand why she did it. She did like do partial bits of the pattern, so there'd be, so say your the number of stitches around your sleeve for your size, like for my size, mine is 7 stitches too much, so it's a multiple of, I won't give you the exact numbers because it's her pattern and it's a paid pattern, so the chart itself is 22, so my sleeve was 7 stitches more than a multiple of 22, if that makes sense. So she said to do just a partial repeat of the chart and have a jog in like where there's a seam and it's quite obvious. I didn't want that again, so on those 7 stitches I just kind of came up with this. So you can see here, that's kind of like a bit that would have been a partial chart, and it, to be fair, it's here, so it's not going to be seen by many people, but it would bug me. It would really bug me. So I just sort of did this sort of diamond pattern along those. So there's 7, I've got 7 stitches there between my repeats, and I did sort of this diamond pattern here, and that's just going to be a stripe running on the underarm of each of my sleeves. So those are just like the changes I've made to the pattern. As it's a paid pattern, I can't show you the chart or anything. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and I've been thinking about and planning all of the colourwork things I want to make now. I really want to make a Christmas jumper with some sort of like colourwork yoke maybe, with that poinsettia pattern that's really popular, or like snowmen or reindeer, like something really like properly Christmassy, like a colourwork jumper like that. I would also really like to make an all over colourwork cardigan, and I've got my eye on a pattern. I'll actually get the book down from my bookshelf up there. So this book is Echoes by Susan Crawford, and I've got quite a few of her books because this is not one of them, but she has a series of books where she takes vintage knitting patterns from like the 1920s to the 1950s, and updates them for modern use, for more, because generally older knitting patterns come in one size and you're expected to grade it yourself, make a bigger size yourself. I'm a big girl, so and I vintage patterns are also usually not they're not good in terms of like yarn and gauge and things like that. Like, they don't have a lot of information in them, very brief. So what she does is she modernises these popular vintage patterns and grades them for sizes up to a 60-inch bust, and she's got a series of 3 books, and I've pre-ordered her 3rd book, which is her colourwork version. So yeah, so I want to get into knitting more colourwork. So this book is Echoes. This is not vintage patterns that have been updated for modern use. This is 24 modern knits inspired by iconic women, and this one is the one that I've been eyeing up. So this is the Vita cardigan, and it's in DK weight yarn, which is good because a lot of colourwork patterns are in fingering weight or full ply weight yarn, and this is in DK weight, which is great, and it's an all over colourwork cardigan. I'm not going to knit this anytime soon, but I want to improve my colourwork skills and my confidence to the point where this is my end goal. This is my end goal, or something like this, an all over colourwork cardigan. That's what I want. I want this one special cardigan that I'll have for the rest of my life, that I put months and months of work into knitting these really complex colourwork like sections of this cardigan. Like, it's a goal. It's been like a pie in the sky dream for a long time, and now it feels real, like I can actually do it. So yeah, definitely recommend pretty much any of her books. I've got quite a few. I've got the first 2, Stitch in Time. Stitch in Time is the series about the vintage patterns gone modern, and I'm going to be knitting some of those, so you'll hear more about that in future podcasts. And I've also got another one of hers that I can't see, but I have got another one of her books somewhere as well that's not a vintage one, I don't think. But yeah, definitely recommend her knitting designs. Not that I've actually knitted any of them, but her books are great. Like, I've sat and gone through patterns like, shall I do this, read it through. So yeah, but yeah, hopefully you'll see more of her designs on this podcast. So next, let's talk about a failed project, because I think sometimes we don't talk about them when they're failures. Online and on social media, you want everything to be happy, but like, especially when I'm designing stuff, like, there are so many things that just never get made because it just didn't work right, or it wasn't what it was in my head. And I feel like this one is a knitting, so I'm following a knitting pattern, but the image that I had in my head was not the one, like, it just didn't work when I tried it, and I just, yeah. So the pattern that I'm using is a great pattern. I've used it before to make a jumper. It's a really good pattern. It's a really basic pattern, but it's great. And that's the Tolsta Tee by Rebecca Clow, the same designer as the previous sweater. And her, and this is sort of a t-shirt in DK weight, although there is now a fingering weight version as well. And it's just a plain raglan t-shirt, and you can kind of do what you want with it, add your own stitch patterns, add your own colours, etc. So I thought, do you know what, I'm going to make one, and I'm going to make one that is sort of an off-white colour with navy stripes. Like, really, like, I feel like that's kind of like a step. Having a t-shirt or a top or a jumper or a cardigan in that pattern is kind of like a staple, because it's quite versatile, it looks good, it's quite summery because it's got like a bit of a sailor vibe. And I was like, do you know what, that's going to be a knitted t-shirt. I'm going to make my first knitted t-shirt, it's going to be that. And it didn't go very well. So the yarn that I tried it with was Drops Bell. So this is a DK weight, and it's 53% cotton, 33% viscose and 14% linen, so it's very much a summer yarn. And I'll hold it up to the camera because this camera does really good close-ups of yarn. Sorry about the shakiness, I do have a tremor because of my long COVID. So there is the yarn. So it's got quite a loose ply. It's really nice, it feels nice, it's lovely and soft. I can tell that it'd be lovely and cool to wear in the summer. And then the other colour, so that is colour cream, I think, or like natural, so called something like that. It's colour 2. And then the blue that I've gone is colour 20, which I think is called like marine blue, something like that. So that's the other colour, so a true navy, really, and those are them together. So you kind of get the vibe that I'm going for. And I was originally going to knit the different pattern, the Seaborn Tee, can't remember who it was by, that's got like a ruffled edge, but I didn't realise it was a bottom-up pattern when I chose it and I bought the yarn for it. I didn't really want to do a bottom-up pattern for my first t-shirt. I'm very much a pear-shaped, my hips are 6 inches bigger than my bust, so I kind of like knitting stuff top-down, so then I can do A-line increases for my hips if I need them, if they're quite tightly fitting on the bust. So I didn't really want to do bottom-up. I do want to knit that pattern, but just not now. So I was like, do you know what, I'm just going to do the Tolsta Tee. I've already got the pattern, I've already knitted it before, I kind of know what I'm doing. And then I knitted a swatch in this yarn and I did not like it. It was so holey at the gauge that you need for the Tolsta Tee. You'd be able to see like the outline of my bra underneath this top. And that's not the vibe I wanted. I wanted something that was summery, that I could just wear as is, over the top of my underwear, nothing underneath. I didn't want to wear a vest underneath because this is a summery yarn. So I knitted a few more swatches, decided what gauge I wanted, and then I was like, do you know what? I'm just gonna, like, the Tolsta Tee is quite a flexible pattern. There's even a whole PDF included with the pattern that's got different modifications that some of her testers made, like different collars and colours and stitches and stuff they did, and there was one that had a rolled collar where you stockinette knit a section and then you sew it together and then you keep knitting. You've got this rolled bit. I did actually do that. So yeah, so I did that. I can't really bring it any closer because it's all like, all of this is all tangled in a bag. So yeah, so that's like the rolled collar. You can see I've abandoned this. So I was, I tried this, and then I did some, I got to about here, tried it on, and I was like, oh, there's something wrong there. It was all ruffling on my shoulders, and I had not got the right stitch count here. So I was playing around with where to put my raglan increases because I'm at a different gauge than the pattern at this point. So I'm kind of like just using the concept and doing it. The second time I did it, I forgot to do all of the short row shaping, so I had to rip that out. And then I thought, do you know what? I'm not really enjoying the rolled collar. So I did one with a 1x1 rib collar, just like the pattern, and look how big it is. It's huge. And I've noticed with the 2 Rebecca Cloud patterns that I've got is they have quite big neck holes, and I wanted it to be sort of smaller than that. So I tried casting on smaller stitches, and then I didn't have enough. Like, it was coming out too much here, it just wasn't fitting. And then I think this was my final go. I went back to the rolled collar again, and I was like, okay, so my gauge isn't working. So I've gone, my gauge is smaller. So that means I need to go up 2 sizes, I think, to get the right thing. So I was knitting away happily, and then I realised that I'd actually accidentally started it with 2 sizes too small. So I'd gone 2 sizes down instead of 2 sizes up, all of the stitch counts, so it looks stupid when it's on me. So I kind of like, I even gave up ripping it out because I was so annoyed with it, shoved it in a bag and was like, do you know what? I'll get you out next summer and try again. So that is my failed project from the end of August, and yeah, it was a bit demotivating. And then I started the Kerr Sweater, and I was like, no, this is what I needed after stressing about trying to get this blooming thing. I just need to follow a pattern. That's my problem. I think my problem is that I usually find a pattern, I'm like, yeah, that's nice, but I'm going to change it, I'm going to make the size a bit different, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, make it my own. I just needed to pick a different pattern and follow it at a gauge that I liked for that yarn. Okay, so we've got one more knitting project to talk about, and that is my current pair of socks that I've got on my needles. So we'll talk about the yarn first, I think. So I've got yarn coming out of it, but yeah, so I'll bring this up close to the camera. So this is the yarn. It's quite a bright yellow. It's hand-dyed sock yarn, and the colourway is inspired by Winnie the Pooh. So it's kind of like these yellows with these red speckles too for his t-shirt, I assume. So yeah, so it's a Winnie the Pooh one, and it is by Giddy Yarns, and she does some great inspired, she sort of takes inspired from like children's literature. She's also done like a Hobbit themed collection, but I don't massively enjoy, I've got some of her yarn. Her dye style is not really for me, I don't think. It tends to have quite a lot of undyed yarn in it. If you can see, there's quite a lot of white poking through of this, which is really lovely on a pastel colour like this, but with a darker colour I'm not really feeling it. So yeah, anyway, so this is that familiar sock yarn base that's 425 meters per 100 grams, 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon. But yeah, the special thing is it's a Winnie the Pooh one, so I'm making some Winnie the Pooh socks. I specifically, again, ordered this yarn to make a pair of socks in it because I wanted Winnie the Pooh socks. So these are my Winnie the Pooh socks. Just untangling it there. So that's kind of what that looks knitted up. And what I like with hand-dyed yarn is you don't necessarily always know what it's going to look like when you knit it up, because you can see I've kind of got these sections of pooling here, which isn't too bad actually. A little bit stripy, but I kind of like it. I kind of like that sort of, you don't know what you're going to get. Well, you kind of know what you're going to get with hand-dyed yarn. So I'm not using a pattern specifically. I have labelled it as a pattern on Ravelry, but it's just a cuff down sock with the measurements that I usually make. I'm just kind of making it up as I go along. I'm doing a heel flap and gusset with just a slip stitch heel, and then I'm doing a cable down one side of the foot, just like on the first pair of socks I showed you previously, the red pair, the Christmas pair. I had, oh, they're still here. I had kind of like that lace stripe down one side of the sock. This one's got a cable down one side of the sock, and the cable chart that I'm using is from a pattern called Socks on a Plane, and I'm going to have to put the designer's name here because I forgot to look it up. I looked up everybody else's designer names preparation for this podcast, which I don't normally do because I usually come in unprepared, and this is the one that I've just realised I didn't. So that's kind of what the cable looks like, and it's, yeah, I'm only using the chart from that pattern though, because that pattern is toe up socks and I'm knitting these cuff down, but I've just kind of like taken the chart from it essentially. It's a free pattern as well, so if you are interested in knitting a sock with a cable down it, it's probably a good one to do, but I didn't want to do toe up. I don't know why, I just fancied doing cuff down. I could have followed the pattern and actually done toe up socks, but I didn't. I just decided I was going to do cuff down, and I feel like now I've knitted that many pairs of socks that I kind of know how to do it without a pattern now, which is really nice. The only thing I have to look up precisely is the heel turn for the number of stitches, but I found this generator online that will generate your heel turn for you depending on the number of stitches that you've got, which is nice. So that was my last knitting project, and that's all of my knitting and crochet projects I've been working on since my last podcast. I've got two other projects to show you. One is kind of yarn adjacent and one is not really. I do dabble in some other crafts as well, not very much recently, but I have done in the past. I've done things like cross stitch, even stuff like diamond painting that I didn't really like. But we'll start with a long stitch kit. So long stitch is a type of embroidery where you do almost like satin stitch to fill in blocks of colour work, and the one that I'm doing is a kit that's actually dated from the year 2001. And it is Romantic Summer in Scotland by Sue Dakin. It's a craft collection long stitch kit that I got for not very much money on eBay. That's kind of what I'm aiming towards with this. And it uses, so it comes with some yarn, and it's pattern Persian pure new tapestry wool. That's the wool it comes with. You can see all of I've kind of kept it all in the packet that all came in. So those are all of the colours. And I think I'm just over halfway with this. I haven't picked this up for a couple of weeks, so I'll have to remind myself of it. So basically, you have this piece of canvas that's got a picture drawn on, and then you sort of, it's almost like colour by numbers, but with these long vertical stitches. If I bring it right up, hopefully you can see all of those stitches. And yeah, this is called Romantic Scotland in Summer, and it's like from what I can see, there are 4 of it, and it's like Romantic Scotland in Spring, etc. But this is the one that I found, and it's actually looking at the photos of the others, I don't think I'll do any of the others. So yeah, this was really nice to do. I think my back is quite neat. It kind of looks a bit like the front. So yeah, I've got this bit at the bottom to do, and I've kind of got a bit stalled in it because this bit is really detailed. We've got loads of like little flowers down here to do that are only like 1 or 2 threads of the canvas. So I've kind of put it away until I'm up for doing something so fiddly. The bigger sections are really enjoyable to do, like sat listening to an audiobook. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing in terms of needlework. That I have shown a needlepoint, my first needlepoint on this podcast before. I never actually showed it when I finished it. I should get that out and show you it, because I did finish it and I showed it like half finished like a year ago, something like that. So yeah, I do enjoy needlework. I just have to be in the mood for it, and it's not something I'd necessarily say I'm good at or really passionate about like I am with crochet and knitting, but this is really enjoyable. Long stitch is really enjoyable. I think it would be really enjoyable by kids. It kind of like cross stitches, kind of like fill in, kind of like paint by numbers but with thread. This is kind of like paint by numbers with thread. Yeah, I actually, it's quite mindful as well if you're looking for something little skill to learn. It's really easy to learn. Yeah, would recommend. Yeah, I'm excited for this actually. I'm gonna put it up somewhere in here in my craft room, maybe put it up on the wall or something. That'd be nice. I'd like to fill the walls of my craft room with things that I've made. I've got a weaving kit that I want to try as well, so that could be fun to hang up in here. And I've got some cross stitches that I could frame and put up, so just things that I've made I could decorate my craft room with. I would like that. That could be a good nice series of videos on here, like making things for my craft room that aren't knitting and crochet. That could be fun. So yeah, and then I'll finally show you my last thing that I've made since my last podcast. And I actually did pottery painting with two of my friends. I used to be a midwife, and they are two people that I trained with when we were training to be midwives. I'm not a midwife anymore because of my health, but I like meeting up with them and hearing about kind of the things that I used to do. And yeah, it's nice seeing them, and it was really nice doing pottery painting with them actually, and just having a chat and a catch up. Shout out to Zoe and Elsie if they're watching this. I don't think they do, but yeah, hi. Yeah, so we went pottery painting at a place in Leeds, and yeah, that's what I made. I made a little pen pot, and unsurprisingly, it's dusty pink with daisies on. Who would have thought that I would do something like that? This is just like me. Literally, even as I was painting it, they were like, that's so you. I'm like, yeah, I know. So yeah, so it's a little pen pot for my desk in my office, and what I think I might do is I might put my favourite crochet hooks are the Clover and More crochet hooks, and I might put them all in it. Do you know what? I'm going to get them. So I grabbed a few from my current crochet hook pen pot with all of my crochet hooks in, but here are just my Clover and More's. These are my favourite crochet hooks, 110% recommend them. I think I'm going to keep them all in this little pot on my desk. I think that's super cute. So yeah, that's going to be on my desk. So that's everything I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and if you want to find out a little bit more about that Yorkshire Crochet Along blanket, I will link it up on the screen just here. I'll see you next time.